Go up or? Where do you want me to sit?
Yeah.
Je commence quelques instants de manière exceptionnelle, simplement pour vous dire que dans la présentation de Monsieur Murthy, qui a été faite notamment aux étudiants, a été oubliée une chose, qui est que Monsieur Murthy a fait ses études en France. Il parle français à peu près comme vous et moi, même si ce soir il va sans doute s'exprimer en anglais. Et il est un ami de l'ESSEC depuis maintenant 6 à 7 ans. 6 à 7 ans, où j'ai eu la chance de rencontrer Narayana Murthy dans des cercles internationaux, et où petit à petit, il a eu la grande bonté de s'intéresser à l'ESSEC, d'être membre de l'International Advisory Board de l'ESSEC. Il avait donné le grand speech du jour des 100 ans de l'ESSEC au Carrousel du Louvre devant 1500 personnes. Et au fil du temps, je crois qu'il y a quelque chose qui s'est tissé entre Monsieur Murthy et l'ESSEC, qui fait notamment qu'il est là ce soir. Voilà, je vous souhaite beaucoup de bonheur et une excellente soirée.
I would like to welcome you to this Les Mardis de l'ESSEC conference, organized with the collaboration of the auditing and advisory firm Mazar and the Lapos Group. Bonsoir, Narayana Murthy. French people may not be the best in their knowledge of Indian culture, as well as English language, by the way. But the good thing is that by coming here tonight, you just become the most famous Indian man in here, after Gandhi and the president of ESSEC India, maybe. You were born in Karnataka, India, in 1946. After obtaining a bachelor's in electrical engineering and a master's in technology, you traveled to Europe and worked in Paris in the 70s in designing a real-time operating system for handling air cargo at Charles de Gaulle Airport. On your way back, you didn't take a direct flight to India. In fact, you were the first candidate of the French TV program Pékin Express. With only $450 in your pocket, you came back to India by hitchhiking. A great learning experience. On your way back, you were arrested by the police of communist Bulgaria because a passenger in your coach had accused you of plotting against the regime. After 72 hours of captivity, starving, you were just told you're free because you come from a friend country that is India. Okay. If that is how this system treats their friends, you don't want to be a part of that. You had already taken distance from the communist ideas you had as a student, but this became a point of no return. You were not convinced. Entrepreneurship only could solve the problem of poverty in India, not any kind of socialism. Then you co-founded Infosys in 1981 with 6 other founding fathers. You understood the huge opportunity in software development. In India, a lot of engineers didn't have job opportunities. What was needed was a company that could develop software applications for customers in Western countries. But back then, the Indian government was business unfriendly. It took you a year to get a telephone connection. You used to tell this joke. In India, half of the people are waiting for a telephone, the other half are waiting for the dial tone. If it is any comfort to you, I have another one. Why Indians are so bad at football? Because every time they get a corner, they open up a shop. But this joke, for me, this joke illustrates the entrepreneurial spirit of the Indian youth. You started your company with very little money, around $250. But this corner was enough to start. You had huge ambitions. At this time, it was inconceivable for US companies to develop their software in a building across the street. It had to be in the same building. You came up with the idea of developing it thousands of kilometers away. They first laughed, but you were right. You became the mastermind of the global delivery model, which has become since then the foundation for the huge success in outsourcing IT services to India. And then the 90s led Infosys to the world top companies. In 1999, it was the first Indian company to be listed on Nasdaq. Your company changed the way the whole world thinks about India. You hold the CEO position until 2002. Then you remain chairman of the board. In 2006, you became non-executive chairman of the board and chief mentor, before retiring in 2011 and taking the title of chairman emeritus. You used to be a board member of Unilever, and you still are one of HSBC, the Ford Foundation, the UN Foundation, Cornell University, or INSEAD, among many others. You are also a member of the ESSEC International Council. You are one of the 12 greatest entrepreneurs of our time, listed by the Fortune magazine in 2012, as well as one of the 10 most admired global business leaders of the economics. You even hold the French Légion d'honneur. What else could you need? But overall, you remain a humble, modest person. I've heard that you are this person who refuses the option of boarding before everyone at the airports. I hope it's not inappropriate to say so, but I've also heard that you still clean your own toilets. You, the $1.7 billion businessman, the one with 150,000 employees. Some say you learned this humility from your father, as a critic of the caste system in India. You always told that students need role models, people to say, I want to be like him. I think that today, not only for Indians, but for all the next 21st century businessmen, you definitely are this role model.
Well, Mr. Murthy, thank you again for accepting this invitation. It's a really great honor to have you here. Firstly, would you like to say something about what's been just said about you, and do you agree with the portrait that's just been made?
Well, tout d'abord, je dois dire que je suis très heureux d'être ici à Paris. Venir à Paris est un événement que j'aime beaucoup. J'ai beaucoup d'amis ici à Paris. J'ai passé peut-être les meilleures années de ma vie ici à Paris. Et puis, quand j'étais à Paris, j'ai rencontré les gens de gauche et puis la droite. Et j'ai discuté beaucoup avec les philosophes. J'ai discuté avec les communistes, les capitalistes et tout ça. Et puis, j'ai conclu que l'entrepreneurship est le meilleur instrument qu'on a pour battre la pauvreté. Je veux bien continuer en français, mais quand je viens ici en France, le premier 2 ou 3 jours, c'est très difficile de continuer de parler en français, particulièrement avec les gens comme vous qui sont très cultivés. C'est pour ça que si vous me permettrez, je vais continuer en anglais. Merci.
With great pleasure.
Well, you've been very kind, and I'm extremely grateful. And while there were certainly no mistakes in what you said, you were extra generous, so I'm very grateful.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Mr. Murthy. So, you created Infosys in 1981 with a capital of $250. And today, Infosys has a market capitalization of about 25 billion. Why and how, you somehow answered this already, but how did you become an entrepreneur, and what was your initial business plan for Infosys?
Well, you know, when I was here in Paris, as I said earlier, I met the people on the left, the right, and the center. I had lots of discussions. While I would like to say I learned computer science here, I didn't. The reality was I had learned all my computer science in India. But I learned much more important things here in France, which is about capitalism, which is about the ills of communism. And in fact, at that time, I did meet even Georges Marchais, who was the leader of the French Communist Party in early 70s. And by the time I was leaving France, I had come to the conclusion that socialism, as was practiced in India, and communism, as was practiced in Europe, were not the best way for a country like India. And as I was hitchhiking my way from France, from Paris to my hometown, Mysore, I had the occasion to spend a few uncomfortable days in a place called Niš, which is a border town between what was then Yugoslavia and now Serbia and Bulgaria. And I came to the conclusion that the only way societies can solve poverty is through creation of jobs, and the only instrument people have to create such jobs is through entrepreneurship, because entrepreneurship is all about converting ideas into wealth and jobs. That's how Infosys was born.
However, we all know that in 1981, India was not really friendly with the kind of firms you considered very internationally oriented, centrally firms that you wanted to set up. So how did you exactly deal with the obstacles that the very licensing system put in your way? How did you deal with those obstacles?
Well, those days, India was extremely business unfriendly. It would take us about 2 to 3 years to get a license to import a computer. It took us anywhere from 3 to 5 years to get a telephone connection. It took us 15 days to get an approval to travel abroad for a day, to get foreign exchange for a day, etc. But then at the same time, we realized that there were 3 extraordinary things that were happening in the world, particularly in the US. One, there was a ruling in the Minneapolis court that said that software need not be bundled with hardware. Till then, IBM said that you can run only software given by us on our machines. The judge ruled that that's not necessary. Then we realized that there was going to be a huge opportunity for software people. Second, there was the emergence of super mini computers, which were much cheaper than the IBM mainframes, but were much more friendly, user-friendly. The third was the availability of transaction processing monitors based on relational databases, which told us that there will be an explosion of opportunity for developing large applications for corporations, medium-sized corporations too. And then the fourth thing that happened was we realized that in India there were a large number of engineers who did not have too many jobs. Therefore, they were available for a very reasonable salary. So then we said, here is this huge demand, and here is the supply, and therefore if we can match the demand and supply, we will be able to accelerate our growth, even though there was a lot of friction to business. That's how it took off.
Well, you take off in 1991 also,
yes,
when, Indian reformed its economy so that it was more liberalized and you got access to capital more easily. And can you tell us how this was a turning point for your company? I mean, must have been.
The 1991 economic reforms were a very important watershed event in the history of the country, and particularly for our industry. That did 3 or 4 things. One, they removed licensing In other words, we could import anything we wanted. Second, they introduced current account convertibility, which meant that we did not have to go to the Reserve Bank of India for foreign exchange when we traveled abroad. That also meant that we could hire consultants in quality, in branding, in marketing, etc., from anywhere in the world. Third, we could open up offices abroad, etc. The third thing the economic reforms did was they abolished the office of the controller of capital issues. Those days, we had a bureaucrat who sat in Delhi who had no idea what capital markets were, but he was vested with the power to decide the price at which we could have our initial public offering. And this officer, because he didn't understand capital markets, he would rarely give you a reasonable price. In other words, if the par value of our stock was, say, 10 euro, he would allow us to go public at 10 euro and 50 cents. And that meant the entrepreneurs were not keen on going public because you gave away a lot of equity and raised very little money. However, the government realized that this was not the right thing, and therefore they abolished this office. Fourth and most important thing government did was they allowed 100% ownership for foreign companies in high-tech areas. Now that brought IBM, that brought Digital Equipment Corporation, that brought Microsoft, you name it. They bought almost all the companies in the world in technology, they came to India, and most of them to Bangalore. The result was not a competition for market, because our markets were primarily outside India, but a competition for resources, for human resources. That's how we had to learn how to attract and retain our employees. These are the things that the economic reforms did in 1991.
Okay, so even though you're not running the company any longer, what would you say it will become in the next 20 years? And what do you want, most importantly, what do you want people to think of your company?
Well, first of all, it is very difficult for me to give you any predictions in terms of revenues and profits. However, I can tell you what I want it to be. I want it to be a place where people of different nationalities, races, religious beliefs, and genders come together and work in an environment of intense competition, but at most courtesy and dignity, to add greater and greater value to our customers day after day after day. Now, what is it? What is the most important objective that we want for this corporation? In fact, in 1981, when I sat with my 6 younger colleagues in my apartment in Mumbai, we had a long discussion on what the objectives for the corporation should be. One person said we must become the company with the highest revenue. Somebody else said we should be the most profitable software company. Third person said we should be the company with the highest market capitalization. When it was my turn, I said, why don't we say we will be the most respected company in India? Because my logic was very simple. If you seek respect from every stakeholder, you will not shortchange your customers. You will exceed the expectations of your customers. You will treat your colleagues with respect and dignity. You will follow the finest principles of transparency with your investors. You will not violate any law of the land, and you will live in harmony with the society. And I said, if you did all of this, then revenues will come, profits will come, and market capitalization will come.
Okay, so you said just earlier that India, with the reforms, helped Infosys a lot to grow. On the other way around, what would you say you brought to India in terms of growth, in terms of jobs, schools?
Well, there are many things that we did. First of all, we were the first ones to introduce the concept of global delivery model, which is all about splitting a large software project into two classes of activities. The first set of activities are those that have very heavy interaction with customers. Second are those that have very little interaction with customers. Activities like interviewing customers, requirement definition, presentation to the customer, installation of software, training the customer in the software that we developed, and rapid reaction warranty. These activities belong to the first class, and they have to be delivered at the customer side because there's a very heavy interaction with the customer. On the other hand, activities like architecture, functional design, technical design, programming, testing, performance engineering, documentation, and long-term warranty. These activities have very little interaction with customers, and they can be delivered from remote, scalable, talent-rich, process-driven, technology-enabled, cost-competitive development centers in countries like India. So the methodology to split the task like this and deliver value to the customer is what's called global delivery model. Second, we also introduced the concept of 24-hour workday. By combining the prime time of our customers in San Francisco with our staff in India, because San Francisco is 12 hours, 13 hours ahead of India, we said we will be able to provide full 24-hour productive day to our customers. That's one. Second, we did the largest experiment in democratization of wealth in India and one of the largest in the world. We gave 35% of the equity to our employees. Today, whether one is a janitor or one is a chairman of the company, everybody has shares in the company. I think that the concept that you could indeed democratize wealth was a very important thing. Third, we demonstrated how by comparing ourselves with global benchmarks, we could indeed bring global value to our customers. That was the other thing that we did. Fourth, we are the first Indian company to list on NASDAQ, and in fact, we are one of the few companies on NASDAQ to fully comply with Blue Ribbon Committee report. We were one of the first few on NASDAQ to fully comply with Sarbanes-Oxley Act, etc., etc. In other words, and we are the only company on NASDAQ to provide the balance sheet and the income statement according to the generally accepted accounting principles of 8 countries in the world, where we have investors, India, US, Canada, UK, France, Germany, Japan, and Australia. And finally, and most importantly, we brought tremendous confidence to thousands of youngsters in the country that said they too can be successful entrepreneurs. So I would say these are some of the things that we did.
Okay, so India only accounts for 2 to 3% of Infosys' revenues.
Yeah.
So it means that Indian firms do not really take advantage of the great technologies that your firm develops. So do you think that this is part of Infosys' strategy to refocus on the Indian market?
Well, actually, that has been changing in the last few years. In fact, some of the largest projects we are doing today are for the Indian government. For example, let's say we are doing a $500 million project for the tax department. We're doing several such projects in India. So therefore, as we move forward, you will see the contribution of India increase. Second, on the issue of the private sector, in some sense, there are lots of other companies smaller than us who are much more cost competitive, much more price competitive, and that's how we don't get to win many of them.
Well, that's actually true. You brought growth to India, and we know that your country has achieved tremendous things since independence. You went for the first time into space, and you've developed programming skills that are acknowledged everywhere. But still, more than 350,000 people live with less than $1 a day, and India ranked 15th in the Global Hunger Index in 2011. So we're just wondering how you assess the progresses that have been accomplished in India. What is your opinion about the way that India has accomplished so far?
Well, I think in the last 20 years, our growth rates have gone up. As you know, today, India is the second fastest growing economy in the world. Last year, when we grew 6.9%, there was so much of disappointment in the country. Everybody was very upset. Everybody felt let down. That's not bad for a country that was used to 3% growth rate, the Hindu rate of growth. That's one. Second, I think we have reduced the level of poverty from 39% about 15 years ago today to about 26%. Third, we are adding more and more people to middle class. But India is a country with a vast population, and there are lots of poor people. The job of removing poverty is going to take several years, and the movement has started. So therefore, I am quite positive that there will come a time when we would have sorted out the problem of poverty, we'd have removed that, but that's going to happen only by people leveraging the power of entrepreneurship to create more and more jobs with good disposable income. And that's one of the lessons that we have demonstrated to the country.
Good disposable income, that's right, but we know that the average salary in Infosys is only 9,300 euros, and we were thinking, but we don't really realize it, I guess, but is that enough to build a really sustainable social development in India?
When you talk of 9,300 euros, that, in India, you will have to look at that being approximately something like about 70,000 euros here, because you have the purchasing power
of course
parity. Because a cup of coffee here you pay somewhere around 4 euros. And
that's a very good cup of coffee then.
I don't know that very well. And then on the other hand, you could drink it in India for something of the order of 7 cents, So the point I'm making is that you will have to look at the purchasing power parity. And a car, costs something of the order of, say, about 2,600 euro. And here it's probably about 8,000 euro or slightly more, right? So I think, therefore, while that does sound low, but I think as far as the Indian conditions are concerned, it's not bad.
But then how do you think you're going to smaller the discrepancy between the, you know, the richest and the smaller and the poorest? Like, how do you decrease poverty?
Well, I think we all have to understand one thing, and that is, while it is our objective to raise the income of the poor to an acceptable level, I don't think any society has succeeded in reducing the Gini index to 1.
No.
It's not possible. For a very, very simple reason, and that is, in fact, this is what I learned pretty early in my career, and I said, look, just as there are only a few smart students, just as there are only a few smart professors, there are only a few who can lead creation of jobs. And these people are human. They need incentives. Therefore, societies will have to create incentives for these people. Of course, without allowing them to be unethical, without allowing them to do things that are wrong. Therefore, whether you like it or not, there will always be a Bill Gates with $50 billion, there will be somebody else, Carlos Sim, with $52 billion. There will always be such people. So that is inevitable. What you and I should be bothered about is what your society has achieved, and that is, what is the income level of the poorest person? Does that person have sufficient money to lead a reasonable quality of life and have decent access to basic education, basic health care, basic shelter, and basic nutrition? That's what society have to worry.
Thank you. And we were also wondering, China, India, you're both the two future giants of this coming world. And a Harvard professor, who's called Tarun Khanna, once said that India and China differ in that India has weak hard infrastructure, roads, railways, etc., but very strong soft infrastructure, which are human assets, for example. Whereas in China, the opposite is true because the collective rights is always privileged. Do you agree with that? Do you think the human asset is the key force of India?
It is true, but I don't want to go so far as my friend Tarun. I have tremendous admiration for China. We have operations in Shanghai and Hangzhou, and up in the north, in Dalian. I would say China too has good soft infrastructure. They're developing rapidly. So therefore, both China and India have potential to improve the quality of their people, thanks to good soft infrastructure.
Okay, so now a bit more about your vision of the European crisis. In a 2010 article, the Infosys head of Europe declared that Europe was treated by Infosys as an emerging market. I
hope Eric didn't say that.
I mean, with according growth rates, for example, like 10% growth rate. So do you think that the recent difficulties of the Eurozone brought Infosys to reconsider this vision?
No, I have always had tremendous admiration for Europe because I learned a lot of things here, particularly in France. And I travel quite a lot in Europe when I was here. And even today, I visit Europe so often. I'm on the board of HSBC. I used to be on the board of Unilever. Then I'm on the board of Rhodes Trust. So many other responsibilities, ESSEC, INSEAD, many. So I come here often, and each time I come, I learn things. So it is true that the contribution of Europe to our revenue is about 25-26% approximately. It's only about $1.6–1.7 billion. It's small. And the growth rate again is not as high as we would like. But that only speaks that we have to learn how to do business in Europe better. There is something that we have to do better. So I would not attribute it to the European market. I would attribute it to our inability to succeed here. First of all, in Europe, to succeed in Europe, you have to learn. You have to learn multiple languages. You have to learn different business practices. Europe is a continent. So therefore, I would rather blame Infosys for not being able to grow as much as we want than say anything about Europe.
Okay, so your company is often presented as a predator for European firms, for external growth. Would you say that maybe the recent crisis, as it weakened some of the European firms, has created acquisition opportunities for Infosys in Europe?
Certainly, I think we have a very good acquisition group, and they are looking at it. Look, at the end of the day, we live in a globalized world. What is globalization? I define globalization as sourcing capital from where it is cheapest, sourcing talent from where it is best available, producing where it is most cost effective, and selling where the markets are without being constrained by national boundaries. In such a world, we all have to accept that a company which is much richer, which is much stronger, will indeed make bid for a company that is much weaker. It doesn't matter whether it's India, whether it's France, whether it is US, doesn't matter. That's the law of the jungle. We all know that. Let me give you the corollary of that. I was once speaking in Australia, and an Australian journalist asked me, your companies are all coming here and you're taking jobs away from Australian companies. Is what you're doing right? Then I told him, I said, look, when I get up in the morning, I go to my fridge. It's a General Electric fridge. We had our own very good refrigerator manufacturing company, Godrej. But that was not as financially strong as GE, therefore they couldn't compete and they shut down. Then I said, when I open the fridge, I see Pepsi or Coke. We too had our own soft drink manufacturing companies. They made wonderful soft drinks, but they were not as powerful as these. Therefore, they got acquired or whatever it is. Then I come to the office in a Ford car I said, we too had our own car manufacturing company. They were not very, very good, but they were still there. Then I come to the office and I sit at my HP laptop. I said, we too had our own computer manufacturing companies, and they disappeared. Like you two had Sedusi, all of that. I said, then the question that you have to ask is the following. Should the country worry about 200 to 50 million Indians who benefited because General Electric, Coca-Cola, Dell, or HP and Ford, which made their lives better, or worry about 2 million or 3 million people who lost their jobs, and find a solution for these jobs? I said, I believe that we should find an alternative for these 2 or 3 million people who lost their jobs. Because
what kind of alternative? What kind of alternative? I
mean, you should retrain them. You should retrain them and absorb them. Also, what happens is this. In a growing economy, people who lose jobs in one company can go to another company. The key is you have to ensure that the economy grows.
So you're telling, for example, all the European countries who are very, very fearful of globalization because they are fearing it might steal their jobs away, and to be more mobile, to be more competitive, is that the real message that you want to give us?
I think they have to use innovation. They should become more competitive in the marketplace. Because these are the lessons that we were lectured to day after day after day when I was pretty young. We were lectured to by Americans, by Europeans, everybody, that you guys are not opening up your market. You have to innovate, you have to compete with the best, you have to follow whosoever is the best person to offer you the best products. That's all what we are trying to do now, nothing else.
Well, we tried to do this in Europe. We actually opened up our market, and you saw that because from 1982 to today, Europe has now acquired 25 members, and it's very much threatened today by Greece's possible eventual departures. Who are you who were the witness of the European construction? Do you think it's about to collapse, or do you think it might find ways to make the most of globalization again and find a way back to growth?
I personally don't think that Europe will collapse for a very important reason, that your higher education system is very strong and your innovation levels are high. As long as your innovation levels are high, you will find new ways of keeping the prosperity of your people intact. But when the innovation stops, that's when you'll have to get worried. But I don't think Europe is in such a position. Now, Greece is a different issue. You can't spend beyond what is what money you have in your pocket. Yes, credit cards are there, but even when you have credit card, you'll have to think, look at, tomorrow I'll have to pay it, right? So as long as basic financial discipline is kept in mind, as long as innovation is fostered, I think it's pretty good. Also, I think there are other issues. Now, I'm not an economist. I'm an engineer, electrical engineer at that. So I don't know. I may not be right. But somehow, being part of Euro in some way does not give Greece the ability to move its currency vis-a-vis other currencies. And that's, if you're a weak country in an economy, in a union where there are strong countries like Germany and perhaps France, it's not... I didn't say that.
Perhaps France.
Well, so it's not easy. So...
Well, thank you for giving us a message of hope. So we will keep innovating for you, for your sake.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You once said that you didn't really identify with the concept of work-life balance. And as being Europeans, we actually identify with the concept of work-life balance. You said, just start a life and then think about work-life balance. So is it something you still want to tell us?
You know, I was talking to my HR manager several years ago, and she told me this story. I believe a youngster went to her and he asked her, "Do you believe in work-life balance?" She said, "Yeah, I do believe." He said, "How much time should I work? How much time, what percentage of my time should I work? What percentage of my time should I relax, spend with family?" She said 50%. So this young boy was a little bit shocked. He said, "Do you really believe that I can spend 50% with my family and relaxing, all of that, and 50%? She said, "First 50 years you work full and then the rest of it you can relax." No, I do think that countries like India, China, and some of the emerging countries, we have to work harder and harder. I don't know about Europe, because
well, we try to.
In any way, you have already achieved a very high level of prosperity. So you can afford to worry about work-life balance. But my own personal feeling is that we in India, we should work harder. So I'm not a great fan of work-life balance. I mean, for Indians.
For Indians, yeah.
Well, maybe for us now.
Okay, so a word about management now. A very general question. What would you say is the best quality of a good manager?
Well,
or maybe
I think the ability to make his people feel an inch taller in his or her presence is the first requirement for a good manager. In other words, people must feel more and more confident in his or her presence. People must be very comfortable in going to him or her with a problem. People must smile in his or her presence. So in other words, people must feel most confident in his or her presence. If you can do that, then your team will give their full to you, whatever you want to do. They will work in the most efficient way. They will identify with your objective, all of that. That, I would say, is the most important.
So make your team feel like they are 1 inch taller. Some people would say that a good manager is someone that is actually 1 inch taller than his team. Maybe on the other way around.
No, it's not the leader, and it's not the manager. People must feel. In other words,
I know, but it's like an opposite conception of management that was opposing. Okay, so
if on the other hand, if I want to feel all the time an inch taller than people who work with me, then no, it won't work.
Okay, so Infosys management was actually recognized all over the planet. Thanks to your impulse, Infosys was the first company to institute a company-wide, performance-based employee stock option that cut right across hierarchy. So how would you describe the management philosophy that you implemented to Infosys? And was it easy to export it to other countries with different cultures?
Well, you know, we believe that our biggest asset is our people. Our challenge is that This asset, which walks out mentally and physically tired every evening, must be energized to come back next morning with full of enthusiasm and energy to do something worthwhile next day. As long as we make them feel like that, then we are winners. So that's our philosophy.
So we have a question from the audience, from Guido Falxius. He asks, is the competition that goes along with Infosys corporate model balanced by the social perks granted to Infosys employees? So that's a question from the audience.
Social, say it again?
Social perks, like advantages.
Well, you know, what we have done is, you know, I hope we have the privilege of welcoming you there. If you come to any of our campuses, you will see there are so many facilities. There are swimming pools, there are tennis courts, there are, food courts, I mean, all kinds of facilities are there. There's gymnasia, there are, many gymnasia, then there is doctor's office and all of that. And we have lots of social platforms for people to congregate, exchange ideas, to watch dramas, to listen to music performance, all of that. We believe that it is very, very important for the company to create these things, because at the end of the day, when people have put in a hard day's work, then we owe it to them to make sure that they relax a little bit. Though, as I already said, I want Indians to work even harder. But certainly, I think we need some relaxation too. So.
And last word would be, you're an entrepreneur and you've said before that you wanted to promote entrepreneurship in India. And I think there are many people here who wants to start their own firm and be their own boss and do their own print in the world. So what would you say to them tonight?
If they want to become entrepreneurs?
Absolutely.
Well, as I've said many times, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you must have an idea which brings differentiated value proposition to the market compared to all the existing ideas. One. This is extremely important. I have a venture capital company in India, and so many youngsters come to us, but they don't have a differentiated value proposition. Then we say, look, why would anybody buy your product? And in any case, you don't have that much money, right? Those guys, the incumbents, have a lot of money. So first, come out with an idea which has a differentiated value proposition to the market. Second, do some test marketing or do some simulation to find out if the market is ready for your idea. Let me give you a simple example. When I was in France in the early 70s, Philips came out with a wonderful 16-bit mini computer. I was a great admirer of that. But it didn't succeed. Not because technologically it was not good, but people didn't perceive it as being better than DEC, Digital Equipment Corporation, and HP. And they all said Philips is good in making light bulbs, in making transistors, in making television sets, but not computers. So somehow it didn't. Third, entrepreneurship is all about deferred gratification. It's all about hard work today, sacrifice today, and hoping for better tomorrow. Therefore, you need a good value system, particularly if you are part of a team. Then fourth, you have to bring a team with complementary strengths. And if you did these four, money will chase you. I can assure you, money is not a problem. There are lots of venture capitalists ready to write checks. That's what I would say.
Okay, thank you. We will now give the opportunity to the audience to ask questions.
Introduce yourself, please. Yeah.
Yes, you would be nice to stand and introduce yourself and make your question short. But first, we have a question from Twitter again, from an attendee named Pranam. He asks, what would you say is the reason for the current decline of Indian economy, and what would you recommend to set it back on track?
Well, I think all economies have slowed down. China has slowed down from its, 10-11% to 7-8%. Therefore, India too has gone down from its 9% to 7%. Most European economies have gone down. American economy is not growing as fast as they would like. So this is a global phenomenon. So I would only say this is the time for the Indian entrepreneurs, the Indian corporations, the Indian government to think about encouraging more and more innovation. As long as we worry about innovation, as long as we can bring better products to our consumers with better value for money, I think there will be hope.
Okay, so innovation as a way to set the economy back on track. Do we have questions from the audience over there?
Hi. First, thank you, Mr. Murthy, for sharing with us your thought on entrepreneurship tonight. My name is Larry. You can't tell, but I'm French entrepreneur working in social innovation and social entrepreneurship. You earlier said that the best thing to alleviate poverty is entrepreneurship, but obviously it doesn't work. You can see the United States, for example. They still have a lot of poor people there. So my question for you is, what do you think about social entrepreneurship, and especially social business as promoted by Professor Mohammed Yunus for solving all the issues we have in the world today? Thank you.
Social entrepreneurship is very, very important because there are areas where market-driven economics will not work. In those areas, certainly I think social entrepreneurship does add significant value. But social entrepreneurship can only add value in an environment where there is a critical mass of market-driven economic prosperity. Otherwise, it will become extremely difficult for social entrepreneurship to do the wonderful job that they do. On the issue of my friend Mohammed Yunus, Grameen Bank, microfinance, it's still not very clear. It's still not very clear whether it is a success or not. I think that experiment has to be conducted at many places in the world. It has to be studied over a period of time. And we have to see whether it has indeed pulled people out of poverty. So therefore, I am not in a position to comment on that. But it is a great idea. It's certainly needed. There is no doubt about it. But I don't know if it can be to the exclusion of the market-driven economic models.
Okay, we have another question from Twitter. It is a more personal question. From Alexi, he asked, Mr. Murthy, your net worth is around $2 billion. What is inaccessible to you?
What is?
Inaccessible.
Unreachable.
Unreachable.
Sorry, I didn't get it.
What can't you get? Now that you're risen to the top, what is it that you can't get?
Oh, okay. You know, I'll tell you one thing I have done in life. Both my wife and I, we have deliberately led a very simple life. The reason why we have done that is because unless you can derive happiness from small things in life, it becomes more and more difficult to get happiness. For example, going to a restaurant must be a happy thing. You know, you must look forward to that. Or meeting somebody should be a happy thing. In fact, my father used to say that we should follow 3 things that will not cost too much money, but it will bring a lot of happiness. One, he said, you know, go to a library. In India, every small town has a public library where you can get books free. I'm sure even in France it's the same. You can go get books free. You can go and read any magazine, all of that. So he said, you know, you've spent good quality time. Second, he said, you go to a public park. In India, again, public parks, they play music. That's free. This was, you know, long time ago. I'm talking of 50 years ago, not now, 60 years ago. So he would say you can go and sit in the park, listen to good music, enjoy and come. It doesn't cost you money. Third, he said, meet good people and have good conversation. That doesn't cost any money. So I think the trick is you must learn to enjoy small things in life. So all of us try to do that. So what is inaccessible? I think I personally feel that I have whatever I want because I have tried to enjoy small things in life.
Okay. Yet another question from we have a question from the audience first.
Good evening, Mr. Murthy. My name is Anvesha. I'm from Mumbai, India. My question is, earlier in the interview, you said something about Infosys and global benchmarking. Being in the board of Ford Foundation, how do you benchmark or compare Infosys Foundation to it, and what are your expectations from the foundation?
Well, I think the focus of these two foundations are slightly different. Infosys Foundation addresses the basic needs of the poorest of the poor. For example, they give scholarship to rural poor. They have built libraries in about 35,000 villages in the country. They install advanced hospital equipment in rural hospitals. They rehabilitate destitute children, platform children. They have rehabilitated prostitutes. In other words, they operate at the ground level. Whereas Ford Foundation, it operates at a very high level. In other words, for example, I am chairman of a committee of a part of our foundation called Economic Rights and Asset Creation. We worry about what kind of policy should we encourage, should we encourage through various grantees to make sure that foreclosure is reduced. What kind of help we can provide to make sure that democracy becomes stronger. What kind of efforts can we make so that social justice is there for people, etc., etc. So they operate at different levels.
Okay, we have a question from Monsieur Tapi.
It seems to me that you have faced, especially in the 80s, the tough situation of having a government hostile towards companies. It was not very business friendly. If I compare the largest democracy in the world, which is India, to an advanced democracy, or supposed to be so, which is France, I'm afraid that the relation and the respective understanding between the politician world and the business world is not so different. And frankly speaking, for having discussed with a lot of French politicians during the last 10 years, it's just amazing how a very small amount of them understand business, just understand the very rational basics of business. So my question is, from your experience as a very respected businessman in India, with a strong engagement towards social actions and so on and so forth, what will be your best recommendation you could give us to educate better our politicians toward what is business in reality and what is the good news of business in a society?
I think, Pierre, this is a wonderful question, which means it's a very difficult question. I think it's a two-way street. First of all, business people, business leaders will have to be educated to understand the society better, to eschew greed, to become more socially conscious, to participate much more actively in making the society better. Parallelly, I think it's very, very important for our politicians to understand the role that corporations play in making society better. Politicians must understand the basic process of economic development of a country. Politicians must be helped to understand the importance of international trade. Politicians must be helped to understand the importance of market-driven competition. Politicians must be helped to understand the constraints under which the corporations operate. So I do believe that if there is an appreciation course that helps politicians understand how economies grow and why economies, stop growing, and at the same time the corporate leaders understand why those corporations that have shown socially responsible behavior are the ones that indeed survive and succeed well. I think these two courses are in some way mirror images. These two appreciation courses are mirror images. If ESSEC can hold this, frankly, I tell you, this will become globally popular, globally famous, and politicians from all countries and corporate leaders from all countries must attend this. Just hold it as a two-day course where the first day, or maybe half a day, the corporate leaders will talk about the issue of how economy grows and how economy falters to the politicians. And in the afternoon, let the politicians talk about how corporations will succeed if they show responsible behavior to the society. I have a feeling that will become a very popular course.
Thank you. Another question, maybe a last question. Is it okay?
I have to leave in 2 minutes.
Last one, okay.
Hello, my name is Simon. I have a question about your experience as a CEO of a big company. Is finance to you a threat to global stability, to your company's stability, or an opportunity to make it grow and to global growth?
Well, financial strength is both an opportunity and a threat. It's an opportunity because it helps us to be very confident that even if we don't have any sales, we can pay the salaries for the next, 1 year. That's a very important comfort. Second, it helps us to acquire companies. So it could be a strength. At the same time, it could be a threat because it will lull the employees into a sense of false security, because the real security is only innovation. There is no other security. In fact, I say that openness to new ideas, meritocracy, justice, speed, innovation, and excellence in execution. These are the 6 time invariant and context invariant attributes for success of a corporation. Unfortunately, corporations which have a lot of money, sometimes employees tend to forget that money is not the real strength, it is these 6 attributes. So both an opportunity and a threat.
So maybe this applies to Apple, for example, that has today a huge mountain of cash, but still has to innovate to keep this.
Oh, they have to. Let me tell you, if Tim Cook does not come out with good products in the next 2 years, I can tell you, it's not going to be easy. I mean, we have seen, look, today Apple has, 500 billion plus, right, market cap. At one point in time, Microsoft had the position of almost number 1 in technology companies. Today it's not, right? So all of us, if we don't embrace innovation, we will disappear like dew on a sunny morning. That's the only thing you have, only instrument, nothing else.
Well, thank you for this, and thank you for being here tonight.
Thanks a lot. Pleasure.
Thank you very much, and thank you to our sponsors, Mazar and La Poste.